never know if you don't go. You'll never shine if you don't glow. Hey now, you're an all-star. Get your game on, go play. Hey now, you're a rock star. Get the show on, get paid. Only shooting stars break the mold.
Welcome to another episode of the NRL Allstars podcast. Barnesy here, your host of the Allstars podcast, here for an exciting episode. It is our first TLT for round 1, 2026. It's part 1 of round 1, obviously, so we've only got 2 games, being the Las Vegas games, but Jesus, exciting, and we have got some big news in the team list that have dropped as well. For this one, it is just going to be a shorter one because it is a 2 games, so it'll just be me doing a bit of a solo analysis on the 2 games and the TLT that's actually dropped. We do have some team previews that are still to come this week as well. 4 more to come and drop. We had the Cowboys yesterday, so if you haven't found that one, please go and have a look at the Cowboys one. We've already done it, but we've also got the team list today as well to chat about. And also next week for TLT, we'll drop on the Tuesday as well, but that one, Mikey will be back on board to talk about TLT round 1 part 2, which will be a lot more games to talk about. But let's have a look at the teams and assess the Supercoach carnage. Not much carnage. It's been pretty good with the teams that are named. Let's start off with the Knights game. We've got the Knights versus the Cowboys. And the Knights, first of all, are interesting. We've got Fletcher Sharp named at number 6. And I think a lot of people were hoping that Dylan Brown was named at 6, so he would have got the dual status, which would have been really handy. It's not going to happen. That means that Dylan Brown probably loses a fair bit of value because he's no longer an option at 6, and 6 would have been a great option for him because there isn't many options at 6. So that's a bit of a loss for those that were hopeful of owning Dylan Brown at 6. The other big thing is that with Fletcher Sharp at 6, it doesn't mean that Sandon Smith is at number 14. I have seen some teams around that have had him at their starting spot in their team, hoping that he was going to start at number 7. He's not. I actually personally would have started him at hooker and had Croston off the bench, but it's not the way that the Knights have gone. And it does mean as well, though, that there is a 3-forward bench, which I think is very good for the forwards. Certainly Trey Mooney. Today there was a bit of talk that Mooney was going to come off the bench. The Daily Telegraph were reporting in their early mail that Mooney would be off the bench. Now, that hasn't happened. I will just say to Supercoaches, though, to remember there is a new rule now where teams are finalised 90 minutes before kickoff, not 60 minutes. So you do have a lot more time to make changes to your team. And I do think that there is a slight chance that Mooney could be benched still. There is a reason why Daily Telegraph has come out with that story. It is something that still could shift before the game actually kicks off. If that happens, then we'll see obviously a reshuffle and Mooney's stocks are going to be a bit lower. If he starts, though, he's going to be a beast. And he just needs that 50-plus minutes to really put up some real gun scores. So Jermaine McEwen is the other one in that pack that was interesting. We didn't think that he was going to end up starting in the secondary forward spot. He has. Look, how much does it help his stocks? Well, when you look at the interchange bench, it's a 3-forward bench, which is normally pretty good, but they do have Thomas Cant there who can go in and be an edge back rower for them as well. And I thought he was very good at times last year. So McEwen, I think, is kind of capped where he might be sort of a 45 to 50 type of edge back rower as far as Supercoach points go, and maybe 60 to 65 minutes. And if that happens, it's not great. I do prefer personally other options. Now that I've seen the teams, I do think there's other options there, like a Helam Lukey in the Cowboys side who has been named as a starting edge back rower, like a Jesse Calhoun who's $75,000 odd, less money and a dual, and others as well that I do prefer over McEwen at the moment. But the Knights side looks pretty strong. I would say that the Cowboys side probably has less surprises than what the Knights did. But when we're looking at it, Tom Chester did get that centre spot. Now, really important to know with Chester, he was in front during the preseason, but Zach Laybutt is suspended until round 3. It'd be really annoying if Laybutt goes straight in and takes that centre spot because it means that you're going to be stuck with Chester there with no price rises at all. And I do think if you've got a centre wing heavy policy with 4 good centre wings that you're starting, you might not have room for Chester, and I think that's okay. I don't think he's a must-have. I think there's enough options there where you could go for other players instead. And certainly guys like two who we're going to talk about at the Dragons is a must-have. So you've got to put him ahead. One of the things that's really key with this that's quite difficult is that with the way we launch the NRL in Vegas now, it's really detrimental to Supercoach because we can all say, look, we're fine. We don't need Chester in our centre wing because we've got our 3 cheapies locked in. But we might get to next week and the Titans to pull a shifty, and then all of a sudden we don't have that winger that we were hoping for. We might get to a point next week or the week after, I should say, in round 2, where Makasini doesn't get named for the Tigers, and you just can't have multiple guys there not starting. But we don't know that, so you're going to have to either take a punt on Chester or take a punt on those other guys definitely starting, which is a little bit of a risk. But I'm probably going to take the punt myself and not have Chester. Not that I don't think he's a good option. It's fine. You can just go with it. He was ahead in the preseason. I just think there's enough other options ahead of him with my centre wing build, with my strategy. Probably the biggest thing with this Cowboys as far as a takeaway, though, is that Todd Payten has not named the side that's going to be his top 17. And certainly Griffin Neame at 18 was a surprise. He was meant to be out for the opening rounds. He could have been a potential starter even and put Hess on the bench. So the fact that he is there at 18, I would expect Neame to come into the 17. John Bateman as well is there and probably, if healthy, will come into the 17 too. It leaves really interesting talk around Reid Marnie because at the moment, Sonny Luke is in number 14. Now, on the Cowboys podcast that you would have seen in the last 24 hours potentially, I was chatting with Andrew Scanlon and I mentioned, look, if Luke is on that bench, I have zero interest in Reid Marnie at his price. At the moment, he's projected to be around 10 points underpriced. If he's only playing 60 to 65 minutes, that's going to dwindle and maybe only be around 5 points underpriced. And it's not really worth it. And the scoring is going to be low enough where you're not really going to want to start with him either as far as your starting hooker position. If you've got him in your second hooker position, it might be a little bit more palatable. But again, how much do you really want to spend there when you've got guys like Brandon Smith that are bottom dollar just about, guys like Ielu at the Roosters, who has now got a starting job potentially for 7 weeks. There is just 200K there that you could put elsewhere. So Reid Marnie's a no for me at the moment, but I wouldn't be surprised if Neame and Bateman are both coming in, that Luke doesn't just drop back and end up in jersey 18 or 19 and only comes on for injury. If that happens, then Marnie's sweet, but we've obviously got that risk there. And despite the 70 points that he threw up in the trial, Reid Marnie still only had 25 points in base stats, and that's going to be the issue. His raw base is not great. He has to get the 80 minutes, and we might not know that until 90 minutes before kickoff on how that's going to work. But with these 6-man benches, we still might not know because, look, Todd Payten, he's a Swiftie. He could go and say, look, Sonny Luke's relegated to jersey 19 or 18 or something and pretend that he's going to use a 4-forward bench. But then all of a sudden he reaches into it at the 65th minute and unleashes Sonny Luke just because of how the game's been going. That's going to be the tough part about the 6-man benches with the new rule change for the NRL and the impact on Supercoach. Right now, I do think that the stocks for Marnie have been hit a little bit, but Helam Lukey, I mentioned before, he's at the top of my list at the moment as far as edge back rowers go. I don't think you're going to get a better second row forward than him at that price if he's playing 80. Now, we do have Nanai coming back, but it's going to be a couple of months into the season. So that's enough time for Lukey to really make his mark. And probably the only risk is, does someone like O'Donnell come in and play that edge role? I don't think that he will. But if Bateman is healthy, I certainly think that he can. So might all hinge on what John Bateman's role is going to be at the Cowboys this year. But Lukey is talented enough where I'm going to take the punt still. Interesting with the C and VC, which I haven't seen spoken about a lot. A VC here on Scott Drinkwater looks really good to me. I already said in the Cowboys podcast that he had multiple tons, and that was last year against the Knights, and it just looks like the type of game where he could really excel. Over in Vegas, big spotlights, big crowd. I can just see him going 90 plus pretty easily, but he's got that type of ceiling where he could easily look at a big score that you could find loopable for yourself for this first round of the season. So that's one of the reasons why I loved owning him as well for round 1. He's going to be in that very first game, and he's got a really good opposition that he's going against the Knights. Kalen Ponga, I didn't mention, but he's been named. And if we are looking at value buys, we haven't done the Knights podcast yet. I'm going to be doing it this week. But as far as value buys go, look, at 600K, Kalen Ponga is now healthy and we know that he's named. I do think that he's much more of an option than before. And, people that have Kinney at about 500K, if you've got spare money and you want to just go full pod, Kalen Ponga at the moment is a pod. And at 600K, you could go pretty well with that. So whilst I think that I talked up the Cowboys and how Scott Drinkwater could put up a big score, that doesn't mean the Cows can win this one because, as we know, the Cows can score a lot of points and still lose games. I actually could see this as a bit of a barn burner. I know that the Knights were a little bit haphazard with their attack in the off-season and certainly in those pre-season contests that we saw, but I reckon that this one's going to have the most points in and out of the first 2 games of the season. So having a little piece of it is pretty good. And Scott Drinkwater is going to be a huge piece of it. My pod Murray Talangi is still there staring at me. I'm 50-50 at the moment on going Talangi for this one, but I tell you what, I'm going to jump on the betting site and I'm going to put on a try scorer bet for Murray Talangi because I reckon he's going over. The next game of the Bulldogs and Dragons we're going to go through, I want to just quickly mention as well, great sponsor of the Allstars podcast in oneworldcourier.com.au. You can go and jump on them today and have a look. But if your business that you work for or a business that you own has any freight shipping needs of any sort, you can jump on there and create a free account today. Put in NRL Allstars as far as where you heard about them. They'll give you a great rate card. You can start off with some cheap prices straight away. So go jump on oneworldcourier.com.au today and check them out. It also helps support the podcast as well when you support our partners. Bulldogs Dragons, really big ins for the Bulldogs. We've got Jacob Carraz and Matt Burton both named. Jacob Carraz is the most interesting one. I think that everybody that was keen on building their centre wings up at the start of the season jumped off Carraz when there was back issues or injury issues, and we weren't even sure on the injuries initially. Had huge back issues last year. I think it's a massive play at the moment to actually zag and go against the crowd and get Carraz in instead of some of these other guys. Valentine Holmes is more popular and he's changed sides. And I've got to say, in this game, I would rather be on the left-hand side. Valentine Holmes is going to be against Stephen Crichton for one. And the left-hand side of the Dragons with Tui Pilotu is the more potent. Tui Pilotu scored all those tries because that's where the most tries were coming for the Dragons. And we've got Moses Suli inside him now. So when you have a look at, changing door moments, we've got Carraz now, who's named and healthy, similar price to what Valentine Holmes is, who is much more fancied in the ownership states. And I just think that I would go Carraz every day of the week. And I do think that Valentine Holmes is going to get less ball. I do think there's going to be less attack down that side. And I do think that Holmes doesn't have the upside that Carraz does now. So if you're happy to take the risk that Carraz won't get hurt, and that is the big problem, and you're happy with the Bulldogs pretty early buy, then I think Carraz is a really good one to jump on right now based on the team list as well. We've also got pretty good news on the benches. I think that for the Dragons, there was quite a bit of interest in guys like Hamish Stewart and Luciano Leilua. Both of them have been named to start. I'm going to say the same thing as I said with Hamish Stewart as I did with Mooney, though. Just be careful looking 90 minutes before kickoff because there is a chance that Stewart could end up benched himself with a late change. That's something that Flano does do a bit. But Leilua starting, I said that I had no interest in him if he wasn't starting, and I didn't think that he would. Now that he's starting, geez, it's tough because you have to try and guess at 420K, is that going to be a 60-minute edge back rower or 80 minutes? He looks really trim. If he goes 80 minutes, I tell you what, he is going to be 20 points undervalued and a guy that you can play with a bit of confidence. And he looked really good in the off-season. So, the 80-minute roll, 420K, I would love to buy that. The problem is that you're going to have to guess whether that's going to be the case or not. You got Ryan Couchman on the bench who could come in and play that edge. Even when Leilua has started in prior years, he's still only played about 60 minutes. So it's leaning towards me thinking that despite him starting, he's still not going to get the full 80. And if he doesn't get the full 80, it's not really going to be worth it. Hamish Stewart makes a mountain of tackles. If he's at 13 at around the 400K price points, he's going to be huge value. But he's got to stay at 13 and he's got to get that 50 or 55 minutes to be able to be viable. So that's going to be the thing. And that's probably the hardest thing with these Supercoach teams that are named. We all know that even though they've been named, we don't know what the rotations are going to be. And we don't know whether the coaches are going to stick to that starting 13 or not, or in fact, even what their 17 is going to be with those extended benches as well. So it does make it quite difficult. One other notable thing, though, particularly for draft, if you got in on Damien Cook at the Dragons, you're in for a great start to the season because there is nobody that can play hooker. So Damien Cook's back to 80 minutes all of a sudden. So that's pretty viable to start the season. How long does that last for? Not sure, because there is guys like King Tongia who could come and fill in, and he could find himself in the top 17 potentially to give Cook a breather. And then we have to also get some injury news on Little as well on how he's progressing. So in draft, it's great. If you've already done your drafts and you've already got Cook in, I think it's great value. If you haven't done your drafts yet, Cook could be a nice little late round pick where you could get some value early on and even trade him on because he's going to start the season playing big minutes, it looks like. Everything else is pretty much as per program for the Dragons. I didn't really have any other big takeaways from it, aside from that change of sides that I mentioned. I talked about it all like it was all about Holmes, but it's actually also about Moses Suli. I quite liked him as a pod play because Moses Suli was one of the biggest beneficiaries of the new scoring system, as we saw. And that's going to be gold on the left-hand side. He was already going to be potentially, 8 to 10 points underpriced. If he's on that Tuipulotu side and the left-hand side, which naturally they go to more, he could be like 14, 15 points underpriced. And all of a sudden you're looking at maybe a guy that could get to gun status for the first time in his career, where he goes sort of a 63 type of average. And that would be absolute gold at his price point. $470K. It's one of the cheaper options that you could look at if you can't afford that third or fourth more expensive guy in your centre wing, but you want to sort of have that build where you got that strike there. He's going to be a good pod option. So I do like the Surly call even more now that he's on that left-hand side. And I've actually wished that I target him heavier in draft because in draft it would have been great. But those are the big takeaways, I think, for the first team lists. A lot to think about. I think the important thing is to just remember that we're not really going to know the rotations, obviously, until they get out on the field, but 90 minutes before you're going to get an idea. So really, really important that you check out 90 minutes before, because I do think, particularly with that Cowboys side, there's going to be a lot of changes. But there it is. That's my quick takeaway for TLT Part 1, Round 1. We'll have a much longer one for TLT Part 2 when that drops next week. Until then, enjoy the games in Vegas this week. Make sure you keep grabbing our team preview podcast, though, because we've got a lot of previews, including the Roosters, coming up shortly before we get to the TLT next week, and they'll be dropping all through the week. So enjoy those. You can get them straight away if you subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes, and also follow us on X as well as Facebook, Instagram, and everywhere else that you can find us. So thanks very much for tuning in, everyone. Really appreciating the listens. It's been great in the off-season. We'll be back again with a team preview podcast shortly and TLT Round 1 Part 2 next week. Until then, can't wait to talk more footy again with everyone real soon.
You'll never know if you don't go. You'll never shine if you don't glow. Hey now, you're an all-star. Get your game on, go play.